we have some time for discussion. Okay. So, you do. I have a question too, but sometime.
Well, such an impressive content. You speak very rapidly. To the extent I could follow you, I would ask a question. Do you think that this closure of constraints is necessary after because development is more than embryology. After you were born, you continue developing. And then I think, it's a hint, I'm not sure, but I think that this closure will somehow be less closed when you're outside the uterus or when you are under more uncontrolled conditions. And so my question is that, do you think that this kind of autonomy would continue, would persist after the organism is, well, exposed to external conditions and so on?
Thank you for the question. I was expecting the question. Well, okay, actually this kind of closure of constraint can be followed up to the level of organogenesis. Now, we don't claim that this is what is going on in all the lifetime of the living system. We want to lay out the prerequisites and the conditions for a living system for an individual to be created. So, of course, in our body, there's no only closure of constraints. Some things are just self-organization. Okay. But what we try to suggest here is that in order to achieve such kind of development, you need to have a closure of constraint. You need to have a kind of regulation on your development that is achieved only via a closure of constraint. Otherwise, you cannot develop to a single individual entity. You will remain a school of fish.
But would you say that we lose autonomy as we grow?
Well, okay. Well, autonomy is something that is very controversial because we cannot say that we are fully autonomous. We need oxygen, we need our friends, we need food, we need so many materials that we don't have in order to metabolize. So, well, you may lose. Okay, this is very hard because autonomy is distinguished between constitutive and interactive autonomy. So here, what I have tried to emphasize is the part of constitutive autonomy. Because after you achieve such a development, then you are ready for a lot of interaction. So some closures cannot be achieved within the system, within your system, but are achieving closure outside the system. That's why you need some environments in order to operate. Okay, take for example the two twins, two brothers that cannot separate each other when they go to the university. Okay, this is a closure which is interactional, and of course it breaks up to a point. But did I answer?
Yeah, this is a sort of general question about this kind of project. Well, one thing is that some of these concepts, certainly autonomy, and I think this closure stuff as well, are things that sound like they can be continuum properties, that you can be more or less of these. And it sounds to me like you're trying to suggest that there's a transition here. That's a pretty clearly drawn line where you get this property that you didn't have. And I wonder if you could comment on did I understand that rightly? And also, I mean, regarding individuality more generally, one strategy is to be pluralistic about individuality and say that you are an individual in one sense and not in another. And you know, it sounds like you're trying to privilege one form of individuality. And could you comment on why, if I got that right, why we should?
Okay. If I read this correct, the first question was that if the transition to a situation where you have closure of constraint is an absolute or a transient one.
Yeah. If it's is there a real phase transition?
Okay. No, that's a very, very good remark. And actually, if I meant that it is a natural one, it's a great mistake. No, actually, we analyze pretty detailed in our paper in Ludus Vitalis this transition is a gradual one. Even at this level of the phospholipids and because this goes also to other things. For instance, when the kids started to reach the hand and to interact with the world and all this internalization functions. No, this is a very gradual transition. We cannot say that actually, okay, probably because the fact that we try to model it on a closure of constraints, a specific closure, gives the impression that we need, now you have it, now you don't. No, it's not like that. But we have to model it somehow. Okay. No, it's a very gradual transition, and actually we are not sure when it happens and how it happens, or what is the degree, if you like, of the intervention and of the implication, and of which exactly groups of constraints that make it happen. Okay, but no, this was just the logical modeling of that. Now, regarding the other question, first of all, I would like to distinguish between individuality in general and organismal individuality in living systems. Now, I just try to discuss individuality in living systems. Okay. It seems to me that whatever is autonomous, it can be considered as an individual, but not the other way around. Now, I'm very sympathetic to, of course, and I'm very antipathetic to any non-pluralistic approach. I just want to, our intention here is to try to build a theoretical framework which also replies to some of the basic, the fundamental questions of that these theories and that these domains brings with it. So, for instance, function, evolutionary unit, normativity, teleology. For instance, I have a very big problem explaining teleology and normativity of living systems following any other kind of framework. So I'm sure that when this will develop, if it will develop, it will develop to a way that it will integrate many other ideas and theories, but the principle of this approach would be that we need an organizational approach to function. I think this is what would be the core of this theory.
Greg.
So you just described, this sort of continuum, music to my ears. It sort of reminds me of, what in Peter Godfrey Smith's new book, he talks about Darwinian individuals, right? And there's a continuum there. And you used at one point the concept of adaptive agency as a condition, and yet the overall flavor of the talk, as I understood it, was that you weren't happy using any kind of a Darwinian or evolutionary criterion. So I'm sort of wondering, I have two questions. One, if you can sort of clear that up a little bit. And then I'm also curious about how you come down on some of the classic, the classic examples, the slime mold, the stand of poplar trees that are all connected underground, and so on and so forth.
Okay. I don't think you imply that whenever someone uses the term adaptive or adaptation ascribes to natural selection, then automatically, because this is, I wouldn't agree to that. We have to, sometimes we have to take the facts, okay, and we see organisms achieve some kind of adaptation. Now, it is, what we try to do here is to say that ascribing to natural selection for explaining adaptation is not enough. It's not enough. It's not enough for two reasons. Because it seems that there are adaptations to different levels. Okay, there is a multi-level selection. For instance, in the germ-soma separation in Volvox, there is no adaptation on the unicellular level, but there is adaptation on the level of the whole. In the school of physics, there is adaptation on the level of the parts, and there is no adaptation, there is no new adaptation on the level of the whole. So, so we surely say that when a system is autonomous, it's an autonomous agent. Okay, and for a system to become autonomous agent, does not only need to exhibit implicit normativity based on its self-maintaining dynamics, but it has to have a way to operate on its normativity, to change its normativity. And then it is when you become adaptive agent. Okay. So, following this perspective, I think that Peter Godwin-Smith has provided us a very, very rich and nice tool to individuality, but does not tell us how this is happening. It must only tell us what is happening. What we try here to say is, how is this possible? It's just an attempt. Okay. Now, what was the second?
So the classic examples, like the grove of aspen trees, that are all connected by underground ramics.
Well, trees are very complex in terms of individuality. Trees. Okay. There's a very good paper from Clark Ellen in Biology and Philosophy 2012 discussing plant individuality. Actually, she claims that she had suggested a solution that it would be one and for all. Haven't read it, I don't know. What I could say is the following, that it's not, okay, there are two problems. There are two dimensions of the problems. One is the problem of when something is an individual. The other is what makes two individuals different, significantly different with each other. Because you have an aspen tree, okay, but you have a fruit fly, which can travel all the world, which can meet new friends, which can be irritating me, which the tree cannot do it. So, yes. Well, my guess is that for all these classical examples, because there are other classical examples also, for instance, societies of bees, slime molds, yes. Many of these cases are in their transition to individuality. So we expect to find in them, because it is a Nobel project, that we will study them. We expect to find in them some instances of an attempt to achieve some kind of closure of constraints, and in some of them pretty elaborated, in some of them not. It is very possible, and here I think is what Stuart meant before, that the idea of closure of constraint is not enough. It might be possible that we find mechanisms that cannot be described like that. But I think that for the moment, closure of constraint is a good idea to model function and to describe when you have a functional mechanism. This is what I said.
I'm describing myself. So, first, I think that we couldn't, that's just a brief comment before I go for my points. I think we cannot describe selection at several levels not being natural selection. So multi-level selection, multiple levels of natural selection. So I felt a really strange your answer there.
I didn't see that.
Sorry, I took it wrongly.
What I said is that if you want to ascribe natural selection to explain adaptation, you have many different levels of adaptation that you have to explain. And
one very important lesson that biologists often forget, made by Williams in 1966, you should have natural selection at a given level to explain adaptation at that level. So one important thing, and I cannot resist saying that because some of students are here and disconnect with ecology, is that in evolution, you are saying, and I think you're right, populations and communities become organisms. So I think this is a nice thing, a nice generalization to, like an eukaryotic cell, if endosymbiotic theory is right, is an ecological community that became an organism, or if the Luca hypothesis is right, then the first living being was an ecological community that turned into an organism. So I think these very beautiful things. But that's not my question. There's just a comment that a teacher could not resist. Well, I have a bit of worry. I had, because of Ney's work in Valvaro, I began to work with closure of constraints with Ney. I never worked with closure, never. I think it's a nice idea. But I got a little worried here because Stuart provoked you and you said, well, it is continuous. But then I think there is some kind of possible contradiction there, because if closure of constraints is a continuum, when could we use this, how could we use this concept to say that an individual appeared? Because we'd have to put some arbitrary criteria along the continuum to say, oh, here, the individuality appeared. So it seems that if you combine the idea that closure of constraints characterize individuality and closure of constraint is a continuum, you are trying to say that you can work with fuzzy logic and classical logic at the same time. And I think you cannot. Either it's a continuum and it all is very fuzzy, and so it becomes very difficult to use this notion to say individuality begins here, or it is classic, and you say it begins here but not a continuum. But as far as I can understand. So I get a little worried about that, and maybe the answer could be what you just said. Closure of constraints is not enough, because we need something else that could give us a non-arbitrary criterion to divide this continuum.
Okay. As I said, the transition from a simple self-maintenance to a self-maintained organization, which is based on a closure of constraint, is a continuum. But we can all envisage a case where we have a chemical self-maintaining network operating in a way that it provides materials to the membrane, and the membrane, again, by taking these materials and altering its synthesis, provide new environmental conditions for the chemical self-maintaining network to operate. Of course, this changes all the time, but the two constraints that are closed there. You have this closure of constraint. Again, in the case of maternal materials, morphogens, as well as signals being created within the cell lineages, you have maternal materials and you have signals. Okay, it's obvious that the WMT and the delta signal, following the regular pathways, do not act immediately, do not act out of, in a moment, but then you have a closure of constraint, because the WMT signal will act for, let's say, 3 hours, and then it will disappear. So I think that as we moving towards, as we are leaving the protocellular and prebiotic states, and we are moving towards more higher complexity and higher developmental states, we can see clearly and in a more absolute way, in a more absolute manner, closure of constraints. Now, if you take this example to ecology, and you want to see when two different biological entities, for instance, achieve a closure of constraint, and they are not just driving each other's self-organization, I'm sure you can find the material structures that operate through this closure. And of course, these material structures will not be in an absolute degree and quantity, or it may change in quality, but there will be just that operating on the systems. So I think that it's not such a big problem. Maybe it's a problem, ontologically, but not epistemologically.
final comment, very crazy comment, is that I was thinking if this could make sense, because and I'd like to connect this discussion of individuality with IBM's, so individual-based model, so some connection should be there. And it seems that IBMs are also very bottom-up. Like you work with the properties of the individuals, you generate the model, and the model generates emergent patterns at the level of the whole. But we don't work with this level of the whole, it's rather phenomenological. So I'd like to think, I don't know if somebody did that, but there is this guy that worked about pluriformalization, saying that when we model very complex things, we should build several different models, and then we should get these models together and build a kind of super model. This is what he means by pluriformalization. And I was thinking that we could do an IBM model that generates some kind of higher level pattern. And if this higher level pattern shows some properties, let's say it's part of fitness or functional integration, if this happens, we can take these individuals that are the result of a previous model and feed them back into another IBM model so that we're modeling a higher level. So if we build a model of cells generate a kind of tissue behavior, then you get the tissue, and the tissue becomes the individual for the next level of IBM models. So this would be a kind of strange idea of building a hierarchical IBM. I don't know if somebody did that, or I don't know even if this makes some sense. So I'd like to discuss this idea.
wants to say
something about this crazy idea.
I do want to say something. Not so much about the crazy idea, but about what the crazy idea suggests about how to think about individuality. One of the points that I was trying to make in talking about the way that we individuate parts of mechanisms was to say that the way that you individuate things and how you decide whether something's an individual or not, and the scale at which they're an individual or not, is very deeply sensitive to the context of the problem that you're trying to analyze. And so, you know, I think, and I think that if you look at, for instance, Peter Godfrey Smith's work on individuals, you know, the multiple kinds of individuals correspond to multiple kinds of problems. And I think that, you know, this is the organismic conception of individuality, which is a conception of individuality which answers to a particular set of problems. And you know, and clearly this is also, and so I think that, I mean, this is, I guess this is my plea for pluralism, that we, you know, that we really can't answer this question except in that kind of context. But one, and I don't think Argyris would disagree with me on this, I'm guessing.
No, actually, I agree with you. And I said that, of course, I said too many things. I said that serving a function, in this sense, is necessarily relative to the system whose maintenance is being contributed. So, yes, I couldn't agree more. So regarding the crazy idea that Albert just we discussed it before. Well, I said in the beginning of the talk that maybe this is a solution to, this is what is missing from individual-based modeling, because it is missing because they are not looking for it. Maybe this is what is missing in order to see the conditions which will somehow transform a group of biological entities communicating, interacting together, to a new individual. So I don't know how useful would that be in ecological modeling, but I think that it should be, it truly would be, because it would demonstrate and explain to us what is the relation, what is the functional relation between different living entities in an ecosystem.
There is no other comment. I'd like to thank you, Argyris, again. And I'd like to take the opportunity to thank all our invited speakers. I'd like to thank Pedro for incredible amount of work to help me put this week of work together, and also thank my students, help a lot, Gabriela, Rodolfo, Solange, Juliana, Clarissa, which are not my students, Pedro's students, and Renato, it's Blandina students, that helped a lot with the organization, and without you, I would probably be very, very crazy now, more than I usually am. And so I'd like to thank you all very much for your attention, and thank you.